Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly, and today I am joined with the author and scholar Gordon Campbell. Gordon Campbell is a professor in Renaissance Studies at the University of Leicester and is a Fellow of the British Academy. He has authored and edited many books for Oxford University Press, including the Oxford Dictionary of the Renaissance, Renaissance Art and Architecture, and John Milton, Life, Work and Thought. Today, he joins me to talk all about his new book with Oxford University Press, Norse America, the story of a founding myth. So, thanks for joining me today. Would you like to start off by telling us what your book is about?
Well, it tells two stories. One story is that of the Norse proceeding in the 10th and 11th century from mainland Scandinavia to the Faroes and Iceland and Greenland. And from Greenland, they sail hunting in many cases to what is now the Eastern Arctic in Canada. And they famously, as we've known since the 1960s, had a sort of camp in northern Newfoundland at a site called Lanso Meadows. So that's one of the stories. The other story is the appropriation of the first story by Canadians and Americans who want to have been discovered by people with white North European origins rather than by Columbus, who was Italian and sailed for Spain and all kinds of other suspicious things. So there's a racial narrative which is potentially pernicious in the huge attraction of having the Norse discover America. And I became interested in the attraction as much as I did in the actual voyages themselves.
Right. How fascinating.
Oh, it's a great subject.
Yeah. I've never heard of a book that brings those two voyages and those two journeys and those two things together. So that is absolutely awesome.
It all happened by accident.
Did it?
Yeah, in that, well, I was in Canada in the 1960s, so I heard about the excavations in Newfoundland and the discovery of a Norse settlement. And then in the 70s, my first academic job was in Denmark. So I became interested in the northern world and the Norse. But what really sort of created the two stories was it was a day in Reykjavik in Iceland. And I first of all went to the National Museum, and a great place, and all about Iceland. And not a word about Eric the Red and Life the Lucky and Greenland and discovery of America. And I asked a curator, nothing on those things. And she said, well, we had an exhibit on Greenlandic clothing about 10 years ago, but there was nothing.
Wow.
And then I left the museum and walked into town, and there in front of the cathedral, the National Cathedral, is a huge statue of Life the Lucky. And I couldn't put these two together, and I walked around the back of the statue, and it said, a gift from the people of the United States of America.
Wow.
And I realized at that point that Americans wanted to be discovered by the Norse, by the Icelanders, rather more than the Icelanders were interested in discovering America. And it was that moment that made me realize there were two narratives here, and I had to somehow disentangle them.
Was that a difficult job to disentangle them, or did you find it fairly straightforward?
It was a surprising job at several points. There was a site in in Greenland, which was said to be the farm of Eric the Red, and I dutifully arrived at this and expecting, archaeological evidence of farming, which there is, but there on the hillside is a big statue of Leif the Lucky, erected by, was it the Norwegian Society of Seattle, I think it was, and inaugurated with a choir that had flown in, and it was an amazing moment, and I realized there was serious appropriation going on here, but it's of course denied by the Columbus people, who rather oddly don't think of Greenland as part of North America. And this is it's a sensitive issue because, I mean, politically, Greenland is an autonomous region of Denmark, but it's at the narrowest point. It's only separated from Canada by 16 miles. You look at a map, anybody can see that it's clearly part of North America. But despite the fact that it was settled for hundreds of years by Norse, that somehow doesn't count. Nothing counts until Columbus sails in 1492, and I thought this is a wonderfully daft story. I must get a noose around it and find a way of telling it.
I mean, that's so interesting because I'm pretty sure Christopher Columbus didn't actually step foot on North America. Am I correct? Wasn't it only?
He denied the existence of the New World. He insisted till his dying day that he'd reached Asia, and of course he was working in the Caribbean and points south. He never envisaged North America, never thought it existed, and yet he is the one who was appropriated.
Wow.
It is very odd, but he was appropriated. Once America became independent, they needed non-English origins. They somehow needed to push themselves away from wicked Britain and enter Columbus, and he was great for a while because he was deeply un-English. It's all about founding myths.
Yeah, founding myths. That's always so fascinating. I mean, founding myths have such a long history as well. Like they come from.
Do.
What kind of sources did you use? What did you use? Like evidence? Did you have physical artifacts to guide you on this disentangling of stories?
Yes. Well, there's the evidence that people want to adduce are the sagas, which they persist in reading as logbooks. So I don't assume that there's anything historical in the sagas. Eric the Red, I mean, there might have been a chieftain called Eric the Red, but the notion that he had a son called Leif the Lucky seems to me pretty far-fetched. These aren't historical characters, but they're treated as such. I mean, in the world of archaeology, if you think of Schliemann's interest in the Iliad, and he was sure that there was a true story, and off he went to the coast of Turkey and excavated a site that he thought must be Troy, and he found some burnt wood, and he said, aha, this is it, this is the burning of the city, and he found various bits of gold and assembled them together and said this was Priam's treasure, and it's all made up. It's assuming that these ancient fictions are true, and then getting evidence to substantiate it. So there's that kind of evidence. The archaeological evidence, well, particularly in the United States and in maritime Canada, is all fake. In other words, if you're short of evidence, you manufacture it.
Oh my gosh!
So there are stones written with runic inscriptions on them. The most famous of them is called the Kensington Stone, which was found in 1898 in rural Minnesota. I've been to see it, and the inscription says that in 1362. A group of Norsemen arrived here, and they had a battle, and some of them were killed. So it's the image of the savage indigenous people versus the noble Norse kind of thing, and then they sailed away to their ships. it's bogus, but there are true believers in the Kensington Stone,
Wow.
and they show 1362. That's long before Columbus, and there are loads of these things. There are also things that are misinterpreted. So there are mounds in America in various places. The most recent ones I saw were in the upper Mississippi. They were made by indigenous people, but the myth is that they were made by Vikings, because indigenous people are too simple and enter the racist stereotypes to have done this kind of thing. Therefore, it must have been a superior civilization. Therefore, it must have been European. And there's all kinds of stuff like that. So the evidence is a bit dodgy.
And so all this fake artifacts and then news stories has all been created just to substantiate the tale that they want to believe, that they want to push, basically.
That's right. There is the one licit site outside Greenland. The Greenland sites are important and great fun. But the site that interests people, because it's closer to the United States, is Lonsdale Meadows.
Right.
So it's been recently dated by indeed solar flares to 1021. So it was a short-lived settlement, perhaps 10 years, no longer. There are 3 huts for 3 boat crews. There are no burials. There's no church. It's clearly a shore station on the way to something. There's evidence of metalwork. There are nails made there, so it's ship repair.
Right.
So, why was it there? Well, it seems to have been a sort of halfway house on the way to a short-lived colony somewhere on the coast of mainland North America.
Right, so like a way station kind of thing, where any repairs need to be done, or if someone's sick, you just hang out there, and then you.
It's exactly right.
On.
Yes, and after a few years, they shut up shop. There's no evidence of contact there.
Right. So they're just isolated group.
They're all by themselves. Okay. Yep. But there's 3 butternut shells, and indeed a bit of carved butternut. Now, butternut has never grown in Newfoundland, doesn't grow in Newfoundland now.
Wow.
It grows in the St. Lawrence Valley in Canada and on the coast of New England, at the point where rivers come into the sea. These butternut trees grow. And the currents wouldn't take these 3 butternuts to Newfoundland. They go in the wrong direction. So somehow the Norse acquired these 3 nuts. And the simplest explanation of that is that they were on the North American mainland for whatever reason. Maybe yeah, that's right. But that's all the evidence there is. So it's not huge.
No, it's not huge, but it's also enough to believe that someone traveled from one place to another. Like that's the most logical explanation for the movement of these butternuts.
That is precisely so.
That is so fascinating. So we don't know where they've come from necessarily on the mainland,
nope.
or where they've gone necessarily,
nope.
but we
don't know any of that.
They've been there.
Yep.
Wow.
Of the artifacts, there's one genuine artifact in the States. It's called the Maine penny, so in the state of Maine. And it was discovered in the 1950s, and it's a Norse coin from the 10th century.
Wow.
And it's on an archaeological site that is arguably the densest site in the world. Something like 30,000 artifacts have been pulled out of it, huge numbers of arrowheads and that kind of thing. It was a Native American site for centuries, and there is one coin. Now, there's no supporting evidence around it, And of course, you can build a fantasy story about how the Norse arrived and they, I don't know, traded the coin for whatever they were after. But there's an interesting thing about the coin, which was in I was going to say in the corner, but coins don't normally have corners. On one side, a hole has been drilled.
Oh.
And that suggests it was a pendant. And other coins would have no value, but it was worn as a pendant. And it suggests a trade network that comes down from Labrador, passed from one indigenous group to another. And it ends up in this entirely indigenous site. So it is a real artifact.
Wow.
But what it doesn't show is that the Norse were there, because there's never a single artifact in archaeology.
That blows my mind. It's just this one bit, one tiny thing.
Yeah, and oddly enough, it's not on display, which I find amazing. The politics of museums are a great mystery. When the Smithsonian did an exhibition in the year 2000 about the Norse, they got the coin and they displayed it. And when I went to see it 5 or 6 years ago, they rummaged around in a storeroom and finally came up with it, and it was still in the case that the Smithsonian had sent it back in, so it had never been displayed. So it's quite wonderful.
They have this one thing that they can actually say is legitimately a Norse coin, and they don't. And it's the
only thing. That's right. Yes.
That just doesn't. That blows my mind. That doesn't make any sense. You'd think here's our evidence.
Yes.
Here's the evidence that we have.
That's right. That's right. But the pro-Norse lobby write about it all the time.
Right.
But I don't know why it's not displayed. I just work here.
So people know about it. Obviously, they just don't have it out on display. But they have these fake artifacts. On display.
Oh, well, they're on display. Yeah, well, absolutely. The last one I saw was in Nova Scotia, where I was a couple of years ago, and it says it's a runic inscription. It could be anything. It looks like gibberish, but it's translated in various ways. One of which is it refers to Leif Erikson, and as a result of this entirely bogus inscription, there is a Leif Erikson trail. I've walked it, and there are hotels named the Vinland Hotel, that kind of thing. So it becomes a part of a tourist history, but again, it feeds in a rather sinister way into a history of the province as a province for white people. And this is the province that has the oldest Black community in Canada. It has a very interesting First Nation group there, their ethnography is very rich, but they're all written out of the tourist history, which promotes the Norse, who are the right color and ethnicity. It's very odd, isn't it?
That is very strange.
And disturbing.
Definitely
disturbing.
Yeah,
and it is disturbing. Because I talk about this kind of thing in the book, it has fallen into the culture war, and I get some people saying, it's the greatest thing since the invention of a bread slicer, and other people say it's complete drivel. It's not true. Columbus was first, and they don't trouble themselves with reading the book. That would slow them down rather too much. But they're very firm on this. So anything you write on this subject is controversial.
And I guess writing a book which you've called the story of a founding myth, with the word myth in the title, and then you're looking at these two stories. You're going to get,
and that's provocative. Yes,
you're walking into a big battle. I guess, like, I'm sure you wrote this knowing that it was not going to be happily received by everyone who reads it. And
but by the time I started writing, I had a very clear idea of that. I mean, I've written. There are topics like that. I wrote a book on the King James Bible, and that ran into the history of it,
Right.
and that ran into exactly the same sort of flack. But it's all right. I'm very thick-skinned.
As long as you're ready for it, you're writing it and you know
Oh yeah,
how people are gonna
oh,
potentially,
no, that's right.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
and I'm sure that there are many people that are going to read this book and go, "That was fantastic! Like, what a great new way to
yeah.
look at these things." Which
I get lovely notes from people. It's oh no, and the pros outnumber the cons, but the cons are noisier.
as they usually are.
And yes, they're great shouters.
I was going to ask about some of the people that you've mentioned in this video, just for people who may not be aware of. So, for example, do you want to just go through who Leif Erikson is, Eirik the Red, and Leif the Lucky, just a little bit, just so that people.
Yeah. Well, Eric the Red was the mythical head of a family who may have existed. He was not a nice man. I think we might think of him as a serial killer. He was banished repeatedly for murder. He didn't get on with his neighbors very well, and the story in the two sagas has him being banished in the first instance for 3 years, and he goes off to Greenland and decides that this is what he's going to do. So he sets up a colony there.
Right.
And his son, who is either Leif Erikson or Leif Erikson is a better pronunciation, is the son of, and he's also called Lucky, not because he was lucky, but because the characteristic of luckiness is built into him, as it were.
Right.
It's not that he enjoyed good luck. It's a comment on his character.
Okay.
Whether he existed or not, I doubt. But he went off and discovered various places, one of which was Vinland. And Vinland had wild grapes and self-sown wheat, and it was a great place. So people have a good time identifying where the real Vinland is. And there are many nominations, as you can imagine. So they're the principal characters, but the sagas also have Eric's wife, who became a Christian. So there's a foundations of a church in Greenland, the first church in the New World, that's confidently assigned to his wife, who almost certainly never existed. But let's not let that hamper us. And there are 4 children, and they're all involved in the voyages in various ways. They're great stories. But their relationship to what actually happened is very difficult to say. You can't tell what shards of memory might be embedded in any myth. You might suspect that certain things are true, but when someone is shot by a uniped, a one-legged creature with a bow and arrow, the bow and arrow rings true, but the one-legged creature seems a bit unlikely.
Yes.
But that's who they are, and in a way, that story of the arrowhead suggests a kind of, is that evidence of contact? The one bit of evidence of contact is an arrowhead. It's now in the National Museum in Denmark. I've been to see it. I'm dutiful in these things. And it was found in a graveyard in Greenland, a graveyard that closed in about 1350. So it's earlier than that. And the arrowhead is made of a kind of quartz, and in a style that is can be pinpointed to what is called the Point Revenge culture, one specific spot on the coast of Labrador.
Wow.
So either a Norseman, they would go to Labrador, I assume, to collect timber because Greenland doesn't have much in the way of trees. And this Norseman may have brought the arrow back in his pocket, but it seems more likely, given where it was found, that it came back in his skull, and it is evidence of contact, but not of a very friendly kind.
No.
But that's who they are, and as with all, they're sort of historical fictions. And you just can't tell what is true and what's not. But what there isn't in them is any hard evidence.
Sure. I guess when you think about the sagas of Iceland and all that, you've got someone like the Vikings TV show, very heavily based on those sagas, and they go, well, there might have been a Bjorn, but it might have been 8 different men all named Bjorn, and then that's all being converged into one historically legendary character. Is it the same sort of thing where there might have been a bunch of people with these names and they've sort of been converged?
Well, there could have been, but the striking thing is in Greenland, there's been a lot of good archaeology there, and on some of the artifacts, names are named. Do you name a name? There are names written, and none of the names on artifacts in uncovered by archaeologists in Greenland corresponds to any name in the sagas.
Oh.
Now, there could well one day someone will come up with a piece of wood that that has Leif Erikson or Eric the Red on it, but at present there's nothing.
Wow.
I mean, it is a curious story. The part that people don't know about is the Greenland colonies that lasted for 500 years. I mean, they arrived in about 985. They disappear sometime in the middle of the 15th century. We don't know why, so enter all kinds of daft theories. There were 2,000 to 3,000 people. They spoke a distinctive form of Norse. There was a cathedral, a vast stone cathedral.
Wow.
I visited a parish church. It has a choir loft. There were services in Latin, and all of this is happening in North America. It's not highly sophisticated. They're peasant farmers, but the church is there. There are 2 monasteries. Or a monastery and a nunnery. It's a civilized kind of place, and there's no awareness of this, nor any credit given to it by those that want the Norse to have come to America or indeed Canada. The Greenland is written off, and that rather saddens me. It's a wonderful place in lots of ways. It has interesting Inuit histories, and indeed other indigenous groups were there as well. It has a great Norse history, and yet there's no awareness of it in the popular imagination.
That's so sad. Do you hope that this book that you've written sheds the light on Greenland a little bit, just reminding people
how
great it is and what there is there?
Indeed, but it's in a way it's cut off. There are no flights from Canada or America to Greenland.
Oh.
There are no boats that you can. There's no ferry or anything like that. So you have to go either to Denmark or to Iceland if you want to go to Greenland. And that means that North Americans can't casually go on a holiday, even though you can almost see it from bits of Canada. There's no connection between them, and yet there's a wonderfully feisty sign in the National Museum in the capital, which is Nuuk, that says these colonists say that Greenland is part of Europe, but we, the Inuit, we speak the same language as our cousins across in Canada.
Wow.
We have the same values. We share many aspects of our culture, and we are part of North America. So the discoverer of North America, the European discoverer, was not Leif the Lucky, who simply went to the mainland on a day trip. It was Eric the Red. Now that's the only place I've seen Eric the Red acknowledged. But anyhow, it's a feisty sign, and it's an important one because it's saying we are misconstrued. You are ignoring the indigenous point of view. And the indigenous point of view is a perfectly reasonable and utterly convincing one. It's not daft at all. I mean, as soon as you read the sign, you know they're right. And that side of it interests me very much. And that was new to me because I knew very little about Greenland.
That's so fascinating. That kind of blows my mind a bit. This whole interview has just blown my mind.
It's I find it a very rewarding field to work in. Some of it is difficult, but on the church side, for example, from 1251, they had to pay taxes and tithes. So there's documentation of the church there. So Greenland is fairly richly documented. The presence of the Norse is. What is not known is when contact with indigenous groups began,
Right.
and then there's the great mystery of why the colony failed and what happened to it. And there are the usual cranks that say, oh, well, they left and then they went to North America and they intermarried with the locals. I discovered my own story as part of this because there's a little silver amulet in the National Museum in Greenland, and it has a crest on it, and it's a crest of the Campbells from the 14th century. I was able to date it.
Wow.
So there was a Campbell there, probably as a slave, but who was able to work metal, and worked this silver. So and then he or she disappears. So my theory is he or she went to North America mainland and discovered it, and that it was one of my ancestors. And that daft story, which is truly daft, is no more daft than the other theories that get spun out of it. But why the Greenland colony disappeared, we simply don't know. That's the honest answer. Well, what strikes me about the fake artifacts is that they often appear in areas of Scandinavian settlement in the United States and Canada. Right. In other words, they are created to bolster an ethnic identity. And it's interesting, the Kensington runestone, for example, that I described, which appeared in a Scandinavian farming community in rural Minnesota. Scandinavians are now not hyphenated Americans. They're real Americans. But in the 19th century, they were a marginal group. And they were treated as yokels, as simple people by sophisticated New Englanders. Right. So finding a stone that somehow showed that they were just as important as those uppity New Englanders was very important for them. And that kind of cultural explanation I find very useful. The only artifact I found that didn't have an obvious connection, I say I found, they're all public, was in Oklahoma. where there's an inscription. It's called the Heavener runestone in a little place called Heavener, and I went over to see it, and it's just one word carved on a rock in runes, and there are no Scandinavians there, and it was the only one I found that wasn't the result of a settlement, and I wondered who had done it, and I noticed that there was a railway at the bottom of the hill, and it turns out that the railway was built by Swedish laborers, and at the time when the inscription was added in the 19th century. So I had my solution. So it is at the level of feeling proud to be Swedish, proud to be Norwegian. It's entirely harmless in the same way that family history is entirely harmless. But when it hardens into a racial narrative, it gradually becomes more and more sinister. And that hardening process is what interested me. Often it's not the locals who take it up. The farmer who discovered and possibly forged the Kensington runestone, there's no reason to think of him as being anything other than proud of his ancestry. It's an important point to make that not all issues of where I come from are sinister, but they can be turned to sinister purpose by those who think in terms of race and racial distinction and racial superiority. And that was a lesson I learned when researching the book, and one I'm glad to have learned.
Brilliant. It sounds like it's going to be a brilliant book, and it's going to rock the popular view of America and the history of America and the beliefs of Columbus versus the Norsemen.
Well, I simply want it to feed into the argument. It is, as you say, an argument that hasn't been made before. There may be faults in it, and the only way people can find out is to read it. But it certainly interested me. I had a great time writing it, and it came with some really good traveling. And I hope people have a good time reading it.
I'm sure they will. And maybe this is just the beginning of this new discussion in this new point of view as well.
That would be lovely if it were the case.
Well, thank you very much.
I share your hope.
Good, I'm glad. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And we will link your book down below, so if anyone wants to purchase it, they will be able to.
Okay, you're very kind. Thank you very much.
This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia. For more great articles and interactive content, head to our website via the link below. If you like my shirt, you can find this design and a bunch more on our shop at worldhistory.store, or you can find a link for it down below under the merch tab. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon with another video.